Hi, I'm Tony. I'm a PhD student in linguistics. I'm here to share with you what I know about language. This video is about two sounds which are different in English, but are not differentiated in many languages of the world, and so can pose a challenge for those learning English. These sounds are the tense e and the lax I. So the first thing to recognize here is that these sounds are not the same. You might know this if you've been speaking English for a while and yet don't hear differences between certain words. For example, you can be rich and you can reach for something. You can sit down, but the place that you sit is a seat. And the part of a candle that burns is the wick. But there are 7 days in a week. E is the tense vowel. There's more tension in your mouth. And I is the lax vowel. Your mouth is more relaxed. When it comes to making vowel sounds, the tongue is the most important articulator. Where your tongue is at in the mouth, how high or how low it is, and how front and how back it is, changes the vowel sound that you're making. And the jaw normally moves along with the tongue, so that the jaw lowers and the tongue lowers, the jaw rises and the tongue rises. If you pay attention to your mouth when resting, your tongue is somewhere in the middle of your mouth, both in terms of frontness, backness, and in height. If in this resting position you make a sound, it's going to sound kind of like nothing much going on. To make a low vowel sound, you can lower your jaw and your tongue. For example, the sound aw. My mouth opens wider because I'm lowering my jaw, and my tongue is also coming closer down to the bottom of my mouth. Ah. That's a low sound. Both of these sounds, E and I, are instead high vowels. They're high and they're front, which means that your tongue is going to be high in your mouth and towards the front of it. In both these sounds, the tongue has almost the same position, close enough that we can consider it basically the same position for our purposes. So moving from the central position, if you move your tongue up and then forward, you get E or I. And you might feel your tongue almost touching the top of your mouth and almost touching your front teeth. If you want a deep dive video on the tongue and how to learn to make new sounds, leave a comment below. A major difference between these two sounds is in the lips. This is a major difference for these sounds in particular, and it can help you to pronounce one or the other. The first sound, I, is considered lax. Think about like in relax. It's something soft. This is the sound I, like in rich. For this sound, you want to keep your lips neutral. I. My mouth is opening, but the lips aren't really spreading very much. This is different from E, which is the tense sound. This is the sound in reach, or weak. To make this sound, you're going to spread your lips a bit more. E. So you have I and E. That's what you're doing with your lips. Now the spellings for these sounds have seen a lot of upheaval in the past. We'll find that E, the tense vowel, has a lot of possible spellings, and I, the lax vowel, really only has one. There are two principal reasons E has so many spellings. The first is that the English language has no central authority. Other languages around the world have some central body that decides how the spelling in the language is going to go. For example, Spanish has La Real Academia. Arabic has several language authorities, based in different countries where the language is spoken. But English has no central body that plans how the spelling system is going to go for the language. Instead, what we have is that in the history of English, different people at different times have decided on new spellings and then tried to standardize those spellings. Unfortunately, these reforms didn't usually make it through the entire language. And so when the writing system of English finally became standardized, these fossilized half reforms became part of the spelling system of the language. And if you need a refresher on the difference between spellings and sounds, check out this video. The second reason that in English this one sound has so many spellings is because of sound change. Languages are changing around us all the time. A language never stays the same. Let me know in the comments if you'd like an in-depth video about vowel sound changes in English. What this lack of a central authority and then changes in the sound system of English leaves us with is several different spellings which typically, but not always, represent the sound E. Here's the most common ones. We have the letters EE, such as in feet and week. We have the letters EA, like in cheap and the other week. IE, like in believe, and EI, as in receive. A good guideline for whether it's IE or EI ordering is that you use I before E except after C. And we can see this in believe versus receive. The next spelling is EY, as in monkey or key. And finally, some words that end in just Y. These are adverbs, which describe how a verb is done, or adjectives, which describe a thing. Sharply or slowly are good examples of adverbs that end in Y. Some examples of adjectives would be lonely or motherly. Then we have the spelling ing in words like walking or working. Now that ing itself can be pronounced in different ways. Let me know if you'd like a video on that. But if we take one of the sounds it usually makes, ing, we hear this E sound in the vowel. In some dialects, this vowel differs, but in the one that I speak, it's ing. And in this pronunciation, ing is actually the only place in English where the letter I fairly reliably gives you the sound E. Finally, we come to a few pronouns. The letter E doesn't normally make the E sound, strangely, but in the pronouns it does, such as in we, he, and she. Now, let's talk about the lax vowel, I. This vowel, mainly, has one spelling, and it's the letter I. We see this come up in simple words like in, or tip, or fill, or sick. Usually, when you see just an I, it's an I sound. Finally, a few tips for remembering the E versus the I sound. Like I said before, I, the lax sound, is almost always represented by the letter I. This will be helpful in remembering and guessing at what the sound likely is in the word you're trying to pronounce. Or the opposite way, when you hear a word and want to spell it. And of course, there are a lot of common words that you want to make sure not to confuse, that are differentiated by just these two sounds. We already mentioned the words wick, like a candle, and weak and weak, which sound the same, but have different meanings and different spellings. Also, rich and reach. Another common one is ship and sheep, sit and seat, one being a verb, the other being a noun. Chip, like you might eat, and cheap, when something isn't expensive. Live, as in what you do with life, and leave, as in when you leave a place. Fit and feet, a team versus a person named Tim. And finally, some big ones that you really don't want to confuse, like bitch and beach, and shit and sheep. Now that you have a conceptual understanding of how these sounds differ from one another, be sure to be looking out for them when you're watching things on social media or you're having conversations with people, in order to improve your ability to tell the difference between the two sounds. And if you want a video talking about weird spellings for the lax I vowel, check this one out. If you want to know more, like, subscribe, drop a comment to let me know what was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.